I'm going to show you how a simple alteration will completely change the look of a hutch. I picked this piece up at my local furniture depot. I was attracted to the beautiful wood veneer and the inside was in perfect condition. The outside, however, needed a lot of work, so I began by removing the legs. I had thought initially, I could just paint those and then paint the body, but the more I looked at it, the more I just thought, no, these legs were awkwardly added afterward, and it gave it an awkward height, and I just didn't love how they looked. Now, I have these legs on my coffee table, and they look great, but they just didn't go with this piece, and I thought, I can come up with something better. I began by cleaning the outside with a TSP spray. So what I do is I mix warm water with trisodium phosphate. You can get it in the powder, you can get it in the liquid form, but basically I clean everything off. It gives it a total degloss, so it takes off all that shine that's around it. I'm not going to touch the inside with it because I don't want to take off the shine, but I am going to treat the outside so that when I go to buff it, I'm not going to be pushing in any of the chemicals that have been sitting on this or any of the dirt and grime. So you're going to get all that off first. Next up, you're going to do all the repairs. Now, you could have done the repairs first, but I wanted to go through and make sure that I could see every one of the chipped veneer spots. And so cleaning that, you can kind of see what needs to be repaired. And then I went back through with some Durham's Rock Solid Hard Putty. This stuff is great. I mix it in a little silicone tray. You add it to the spots where the veneer is missing, and then you can sand it down with a really low grit afterward. Next up, it's tape time. So this part takes a little bit of time, but trust me, it's worth it. I didn't want to remove the windows because I didn't want the inside sprayed. I wanted to keep the original wood inside, and so I didn't need to remove the windows, but I do need to tape them up. Frog tape is going to make sure that you get the best lines. I have an X-Acto knife by Makita. It's super sharp, so be careful not to even touch the glass with it when you're cutting, but it cuts through that paper like it's butter. So I'm using my Surf Prep sander to give this thing a buff sand. Now, make sure that you have taped up and papered before this, because if your sanding grit touches that glass at all, it's over. That thing is scratched up and you cannot repair it. I do love sanding foam pads. You can get these on Amazon. You can use them with your Orbital, but basically the Surf Prep has a sanding foam pad where it contours around the curves. And so going around a piece like this, I'm just giving it a buff sand. And because I've already deglossed it, this is so much easier to give it a buff sand so that it's ready to get primer. After I was done buffing everything and it was ready to get the primer, I wiped it down again with TSP just to make sure I got every bit of dust off. I'm using a white primer on this piece and I'm using my Home Right sprayer to put it on. After I get about one coat of primer, I am good to go. I usually don't need to do a second one unless I have some really heavy tannins bleeding through, but I do take a sanding block to this because it's a little bit gritty when it dries, and so you just want to take like a 220 and you just want to go over the whole thing and then wipe it clean with a tack cloth. For this piece, I knew I definitely wanted green because the barnwood looks so good with the dark green from my office project, but I wanted a bit of a lighter color, so I had these Weeping Willow paints that was given to me by Dixie Belle, and then I had collard greens left over from a previous project. I mixed these all together as well as with some bottled purified water, and this made a gorgeous blend of greens. Now I had my daughter Rosie helping me. She is a huge help, especially when it comes to paints and picking out colors. She absolutely loves it. When you're ready and the paint is a good consistency, you pour it through a micron strainer before you spray it, and it creates a perfect finish. On this piece, I'm using my Wagner Flexio 5000, and it puts a really gorgeous layer of paint, making it look like a professionally sprayed finish. Once I did about 3 light coats of paint, I also put 2 coats of polyacrylic sealer. It's water-based to make sure that everything is solid and scratch-proof. For the base, I knew that I wanted barnwood as the look to go with that green, and so I had these left over from the office project. I had a bunch of scraps in my dad's workshop, which, as you can see, he stores the wood for me, and all my woodworking tools. He is awesome. So I used wood glue, sandwiched them together. I got 2 put on top of each other, and I left these dry for 24 hours. You need to clamp them together, and I wanted to make sure the side seams were going to line up pretty good. You can table saw them off, but still it's just easier if everything is pretty seamless. So I'm using some really heavy duty clamps. You can get these in my description below. 24 hours later, these boards are never coming apart forever. So they are going to be solid block legs. I got my protection on. I got my old janky table saw out. This was given to me by a neighbor, but it's a beast of a workhorse of a saw. And you can make anything custom, like custom whatever measurements. So my measurements were 2 inches and 3/4. So that's what I wanted my whole apron to run along the base to be 2 3/4 inches wide. Now we get to the fun part. I had this whole vision in my head, and I actually had to explain it to my little brother Daniel, who was in town from a break on med school. And what I was thinking was, okay, I'm going to label every leg from 1 to 6. And I'm going to write down where these pocket holes need to be. Because as you put the legs in, you realize, oh, I can't put 2 pocket holes there. I can only put 1. Or where's the most important places that it needs to go? And is there support in the base that this can be drilled into? I'm going to have the whole plan set for this. I'm going to create it on SketchUp once I learn how to actually use that. But in the meantime, here's some still shots of how I Craig jigged this together using a tool that I got on Amazon for $40. You guys can build this. It's not that hard. I just adjusted all the measurements to fit. We put it together. We had to hold it up to the base a few times just to make sure. Then we clamped it on, and then we were able to drill it to the base using my brother's muscles, because this is hard wood and it's a little bit difficult to drill through this. But oh my gosh, it was solid. We got it from the roller that it's on, completely stood up on my base, and then gave a knuckle. I got so excited because it was not wobbly, not one bit. So my motto is measure twice, cut once. It really makes a difference when you're making measurements. Now, again, this is why I use frog tape, because I love it. And when you get to take it off, it is the most satisfying thing ever when you get these clean lines and your glass is clean, or whatever you're working on is clean. It gets a little bit stuck from time to time, but really it just makes the process so much easier. I realized as I was taking photos of it that the edges, the raw edges, were still raw. And so I wanted to make them match the rest, and really they just needed a urethane. And so I'm using this wipe on polyurethane. I learned that with a brush, it's not as easy as wiping on. After I brushed it and it took way too long, I got a rag, and you literally just wipe it on. You put it on the rag and you wipe it on whatever you're working on. It's so easy and it dries really fast. I pulled a bunch of stuff from my own house and my own shelves inside to stage this, but the photos, because of the reflection on my driveway, didn't turn out great. However, it did not stop this piece from selling. I posted a video, I posted some still shots, especially some close-up ones, and I sold this thing for $900 in just a few days. The lady who bought it told me she could not be more in love with it. She decorated it with all her china. It's in a really cool place in her dining room. So drop me a comment below. Let me know what you think about the build for the base. Let me know what you think about the color. I love to hear from you guys, so make sure you drop a comment.